Let's take a further look at the option of a bailout from the central bank. Professor Charles Godfred Ackah is an economist with some interesting thought he's been sharing on his file. He joins us live with more on Zoom this morning. Good morning, Prof, and many thanks for your time. Give us further insight into this central bank option and how it will work.
Thank you very much for having me. So basically, I think I need to explain myself very well so that I'm not misunderstood. What Ghana faces now is a situation of lack of resources. We are facing a financial constraint. Okay, so typically when you're facing a financial constraint, it means what you need is resources. I want you to assume, for example, that Ghana is the only country on the planet. And if Ghana was the only country on the planet and there was no IMF and there's no US or Japan, and we have a closed economy, the only way you can get resources, cities to spend to build hospitals or schools and infrastructure and to create employment is for the central bank to finance that development. And the central bank is part of government. It is part of government and the only institution that is mandated to issue currency. You and I cannot do that. The central bank is not a household. It's not an individual that can run out of money. That kind of understanding is very wrong. The central bank can print money as much as is desirable and is optimal to run the economy. The budget, which is being run by the Minister of Finance, is a fiscal policy. And both the Minister of Finance and the central bank are responsible to develop this economy for us to get the aspirations of the shared prosperity and employment that we need. So typically, where there is no IMF and where there's no US to give us money or international capital market, we will expect the government to expand through the help of the central bank. So the central bank would print money and the government has an account with the central bank. So the central bank will just debit the government account and the government will just issue checks to pay for infrastructure, to pay for hospital, and to pay for all that needs to be done. That's what is done in every country. Now, when we have an open economy with the international capital market and with exporting and international trade, there are other options beyond what the central bank can do. So typically many countries now could borrow on the international market. You could get foreign aid, which is free grant, like India will come and build a Jubilee House for us, or build a university, a UGMC, new hospital for us, or Kolebu. This is another way of resources. You could get foreign direct investment, where foreigners will come and invest in your country. You could get remittances. And if we export gold and cocoa and oil, we could get net foreign exchange. So these are additional resources. And when these resources are available, you don't need the central bank to print money. So that means if you have enough export revenue, you have enough remittances, you have enough foreign direct investment coming in, then these are what normally typically governments will be using. But in a situation, in a crisis situation, in a recession, all over the world, even as I'm talking, in many years ago, during the First World War, during the Second World War, Germany, Japan, all economies, they resorted to the central bank to finance the building up of ammunition. All the things that the US used to fight, Japan used to fight, Germany used to fight, they were not financed by the IMF. Actually, the IMF was non-existent.
So, Prof, if I understand you, what you're asking the central bank to do is to print more money. Is that it?
Well, you could say so. That's if there's need. But basically, I want you to see what happened. During the COVID, you have seen what the Minister of Finance presented, the COVID account he presented to Parliament. According to the Minister of Finance, we spent about 19.3 billion Ghana cedi to fight COVID in 2020. And out of that, 10 billion Ghana cedi came from the central bank. I don't know how they got it. Basically, the central bank buys bonds. It decides to finance government COVID expenditure by issuing a bond and buying it. So basically, the government owes the central bank. If it came from the reserves of the central bank, fair enough. If the central bank had to print money, fair enough. But now, government owes the central bank 10 billion, and the interest is pegged at the prime rate with 2 years grace period, and that did not cause inflation. So basically, it means that instead of going to IMF, and remember, the last time we went to IMF, when President Mahama went there, they only gave us $918 million, which is equivalent to about 1.5 billion at the time for 3 years. So basically, it means that for each year, IMF only gave us about 330,000 US dollars with all the conditionalities that came with it. Now, the Bank of Ghana just gave us last year alone about 10 billion. That's almost 3, 4, 5 times what we got from IMF. So it means that we don't actually have a financial constraint. And as I'm talking now, if you go to Japan, the Japan, and first of Fuzukachi, I think misunderstood my point on Saturday. Japan, now their debt to GDP is about 260%. And Japan is not in crisis. And the interest rate in Japan is not high rocketing, it's almost zero. And the inflation is very minimal.
Okay, so give me that point on how the central bank can do it and still keep a check on inflation, because it's a worry for a lot of people who are trying to follow the argument you're putting across.
Good. So the issue now is, I want you to know in economics, printing money does not cause inflation. Just like if the IMF comes and gives us 10 billion US dollars, it will not cause inflation. If the World Bank gives us free money, or when we had a HEPIC and they gave us money, it doesn't cause inflation. What causes inflation is spending, government spending. When there's velocity of money or the money stock is going too fast as regards the level of development and the level of goods and services that are in the economy. So basically, therefore, if the central bank gave the Bank of Ghana, say, an additional 1 trillion Ghana cedi, it will not cause inflation. What will not cause inflation is what would the government use it to do? If government use that on frivolous expenditure, they give it to put money in people's pocket, or politicians just share that money, and there are not enough goods, enough cars, enough iPhones, enough goods, then it's a demand. Aggregate demand will outstrip aggregate supply. That's only when inflation comes. If that money is spent judiciously and is spent on capital expenditure, infrastructure, to build hospitals, to put railways from Takoradi to Elibu to Temele to Navrungu, and to create employment for the youth that are about almost 5 million youth, almost 30% of our youth are unemployed. That should not cause inflation. Every country did it. Just like
Prof,
in other countries where they did it.
This should be easy. Why do you think the central bank is not doing it? Can you understand why?
Because again, it's textbook economic theory. We all learned economics. The time has come for us to, I think, have a new conversation. Why is Africa so poor? Why are some of the things that the theories are asking us to do, they don't do it in other countries? Why are the central banks in Canada, in Japan, in Germany, in US, as I'm talking about US, they printed about 3 trillion during the COVID? Why do they do things that they ask us that we cannot do? And how long do you think that Africa will develop, or Ghana will develop, if it's IMF that's going to give us $900 million? If we are going to always go into the international capital market to borrow, what will be the role of the fiscal policy or the central bank? It's because we have believed that it is wrong, it's a crime for you to do deficit financing. Deficit financing is not wrong. Deficit financing is actually what's supposed to happen, but it has to be sensible. So I'm not advocating for a willy-nilly, carte blanche, kind of senseless printing of money for government to spend. No, I am saying that both the NDC and the NPP needs to begin to sit down to agree that our development challenge is massive, and it cannot be done by outsiders. It has to be homegrown. It has to be self-reliance. And the central bank has a critical role to play. But of course, the government must be judicious and must spend that money wisely. And if it's about capital expenditure and infrastructure, it shouldn't necessarily cause inflation.
Okay, all right. But one thing going to the IMF also does, according to experts, is that it also gets you credibility from people who would want to invest in your economy. How does your proposition build confidence in the people who would want to put money into our economy in terms of investing?
Yeah, it's true. One of the good things the IMF brings is that it brings confidence. What is the confidence? The confidence only arises when we have accepted that we are so indisciplined and we are so unable to manage our resources unless we need an IMF as a referee to check us before we can be disciplined. Of course, if we tell the world that if the IMF does not come, we as Ghanaians, we are so stupid, we are so unintelligent, and we are so indisciplined that we will be involved in corruption and mismanagement of our economy unless some people fly from Washington to come and sit here, then of course we need to go to IMF. But if both the NDC and the MPP, intelligent people that they have in the government, many economists, and the academia, we sit down and say, look, we can manage our own affairs. Kwame Nkrumah did it. Many governments did it. They've done it in Singapore. They've done it in Malaysia. We started our development with Malaysia in the 60s. Korea, why have they gone ahead of us? Why is Korea's GDP per capita now almost about $30,000, and we are still around $2,000? What did they do differently? How did China become a world-class institution? And it was not the IMF that helped China. What I'm saying is that if we are going to do the right things and we are going to be disciplined, the rest of the world, they will know that these are disciplined people. Okay. And I think Rwanda is showing the way. It's a disciplined country. So there's confidence for people to invest in Rwanda. And it's not the IMF that is making Rwanda to be disciplined or for investors to have confidence in Rwanda. So I think that we can show ourselves that we can manage our affairs and we can be disciplined. If we tell the world that we cannot be disciplined, then I think we have no option than to go to the IMF. But actually, the IMF is very good in insisting that you do the right thing. The unfortunate thing is that the effect of the IMF's policies are usually hurting the poor. Okay. They will still sit down and they will check the bourgeoisie. They will still sit down and check the politicians to recklessly spend. They can still collect their ex gratia. They can still write on all the V8, and the IMF will not say anything. But they will tell you, don't hire doctors, don't hire nurses, don't hire teachers. So who actually normally suffers from IMF program?
Thank you, Prof. I'm grateful that you found time to join us. Professor Charles Godfred Ackah is an economist.